Welcome to Paranormal City, where the supernatural meets the everyday. I'm your host, Greg, your guide to the unexplained, the eerie, and the downright chilling. Each week, we'll explore real-life paranormal encounters, strange phenomena, and the haunting stories pinned to locations around the globe. Whether you're a skeptic or a believer, prepare to step into the unknown. The map is waiting, and so are the stories. Hello and good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for finding your way back over to my second episode. You're listening to my 50-state series. Each episode will take a look at paranormal phenomena in a specific state, where we'll talk about notable paranormal locations, cryptic or urban legends, and we'll read some personal stories that you have submitted. And today we're going to be taking a look at the Great Garden State of New Jersey. All stories featured on this podcast are shared with the full permission of their original authors. If you'd like to submit your own paranormal experience, send your story to paranormalcitystories@gmail.com. Be sure to include the city and state where the story took place. By submitting, you agree that your story may be featured in a future episode of Paranormal City. And with that being said, let the stories begin. This first story is titled 3 Unexplainable Events in the Past Year, submitted by Lee6291. I am new to this community, so please bear with me if my experiences have been discussed. About a year ago, I was home alone with my dog when I finally heard a loud knocking, banging actually, that I thought was my door. No one was outside or in my yard, and it seemed to be coming from a wall inside of my home. My dog jumped up and looked out the front window, but there was no one. About 6 months ago, my husband went on a trip to Vermont for the weekend to visit his brother. I stayed home with my 2 teenagers. I went to bed around 11 p.m. and fell right to sleep. I woke up suddenly to the sound of heavy breathing that was coming from inside of my bedroom. At first, I thought I imagined it, so I closed my eyes, but checked my clock and saw that it was exactly 12 midnight. I thought that was strange enough. As soon as I closed my eyes again, I heard the breathing. I laid completely still and felt the sheet over my legs move slightly. Again, I thought I could be imagining it. Within 10 seconds, the sheet moved again. I jumped out of bed and ran into my daughter's bedroom and closed the door. I laid awake all night until the sun came up. I did not want to scare my kids, so I never told them what happened. My husband came home that afternoon and I told him about it. He believed it happened, but what could he do about it? 2 nights ago, I was in bed sleeping and I suddenly woke up. I looked over and my husband was not in the room. He had fallen asleep on the couch downstairs. I closed my eyes to go back to sleep when I suddenly smelled flowers like in a funeral parlor. I live in New Jersey, and we have had frost the last 2 days, not to mention all of my windows are shut, and I do not own any perfumes that smell remotely like flowers at a funeral. Has anyone had any of these strange things happen to them? I am really afraid to fall asleep in my bedroom. I know I'm not crazy. These things are happening to me. I just wish I knew why. The next story is titled, My Experiences, Part 1, My Childhood Home. Submitted by visit_Magrathea. My family have always been sensitive to spirits. I thought I might share my more intense experiences through the years, grouped by location. Here's the first, My Childhood Home. I'm soon to be 34 male now. Back when I was just over a year old, my mother and father moved in with my mother's parents. They had built a second-story apartment on my grandparents' ranch home in New Jersey. My mother still owns the home to this day, and I type this story now while visiting there for Memorial Day. The original house was built in the 1940s as part of a Levittown-style development for GIs. My grandparents bought it in the 1960s when they came here from Germany. As far as any of us knew, no one had died in the house ever. However, from a pretty young age, me and my brother, who is 4 years younger than I, would have odd shared experiences in the house. The most common one was a feeling of being chased up the steps to the second floor. Anytime either of us stood at the bottom of the steps, we both felt inexplicable dread and a presence behind us. But sure, just a feeling isn't an experience in itself. Tangible things began to happen after my parents' divorce and my father moved out of the house. It started when my brother and I were sharing a room with wooden bunk beds. I had the top bunk. Late at night, after my brother would be long asleep, I would hear a computer, a late 90s desktop computer, typing. It would do this every night. I remember at the time not being scared of it, but rather just frustrated with the noise. Occasionally, I would ask whatever was typing to stop, and the sound would cease. One time, my brother and I were playing with our Hot Wheels in the room, and both of us saw a grotesque face appear in the wood grain of the bed. The face was legitimately terrifying, locked in a tormented scream. It appeared for a few seconds, but both of us saw it, yelled for our lives, and ran out of the room. We never could find the face in the wood again, or anything that even could resemble what we saw by making odd shadows against the wood with a flashlight. That was my catalyst for asking my mother to let me have my own room, replacing what was our den. When I moved out of the room, I mentioned to my brother the typing of the computer. He said he had never heard it before and he didn't believe me. How could something happen in a room he slept in every night without him noticing? I shrugged, and once I was set up in my new room, he took the old top bunk and our new rooms were complete. The next morning, I found the computer in the living room on the floor. The first night he was alone in the room, in the top bunk, he heard the typing. That was enough for him to throw away the computer and never have one in that room again. I would also have a recurring nightmare that only happened at that house. A little girl, malevolent, would find me in the kitchen and laugh before attempting to stab me in the stomach. Later, the dream would include me desperate to find out who she was and why she was in the house. I would wake up in a panic from these nightmares, with the odd sureness that this was connected to the typing, the stairs, and the face in the wood. But who could it be? No one had died there. Eventually, my brother did some sort of pagan cleansing on the home and the spirit never returned. It wasn't until long after I moved out of my own that I found out my mother had a miscarriage when I was little. She was having a baby girl. I wonder if the spirit of my never-born sister was angry and jealous my brother and I got to live there. The second spirit that gave us experiences in the home was my grandfather. As I mentioned, they lived on the first floor of the home. My grandfather wound up dying after a long battle with Alzheimer's in the house when I was 14. That left my grandmother living by herself downstairs. Generally, there was no activity related to him in the home except when my grandmother would visit her sisters in Germany. These trips were infrequent, maybe every 3 or so years, but they would be lengthy, 2 or 3 months at a time. While my grandmother was away, boy did my grandfather's spirit get active. He likely missed her and didn't know where she had gone. My brother and I took piano lessons from this guy Bob who would come over. One day while my grandmother was away, I needed to stay late after school, so I told my brother to just take a double lesson as I wouldn't be home in time. When I did get home, Bob and my brother looked terrified and asked if I was just getting in then. Apparently, during the lesson, both Bob and my brother heard a male voice speaking in the other room, as well as footsteps and a door opening and closing. They thought it was me, but indeed, they were home alone. Bob was especially shaken by this. Another time when I was 19, I was home alone and decided to take the opportunity to practice guitar extremely loud without bothering anyone else. I was playing and singing something when I heard clear as day my grandfather's voice, German accent and all, scream my name in admonishment like he used to when my brother and I misbehave as children. I ran out of the house and drove away in my car, too spooked to even put on shoes. I stayed away until my mom got back from work. I guess I didn't realize my grandfather might not appreciate the loud music. Those were the big experiences that happened at that home, but little things like the piano playing on its own, footsteps in empty rooms, voices down the hallway, and items going missing only to show up in plain sight later were all common. The next story is titled, Something Unexplainable Happened at Gravity Hill, New Jersey, Shadow Figure Encounter. Submitted by large-vast-3984. I've been trying to make sense of something I've experienced years ago, and I'm hoping someone here might have had a similar experience or at least help shed some light on it. This happened sometime around 2002-2003. When I was younger, a group of us, 2 cars, guys in one, girls in the other, decided to visit a place known locally as Gravity Hill, located in New Jersey just across the Delaware River from New Hope, Pennsylvania, and not far from Washington's Crossing Park. If you're not familiar with it, the legend goes that if you stop your car at the bottom of the hill and put it in neutral, ghostly forces will push it up the hill. Supposedly, a tragic accident occurred there involving a car and a train, and now the spirits try to push vehicles out of harm's way. I had been there a few times before and thought it would be fun to show the girls. We did the usual ghost pushes the car uphill thing, which, by the way, really does seem like the car is going uphill, and everyone was having a good time. But that's not the part that haunted me all these years. As we were leaving, we took a back road that intersects the main one near the hill. I was driving behind the other car when suddenly my radar detector started going off. Odd, considering we were out in the middle of nowhere. At the same time, I heard screaming from the car ahead of us. Then, as we passed a farmhouse, I saw something I still can't explain. What I thought was a scarecrow standing in a field next to the road suddenly began hovering, yes, hovering alongside my car. It was a shadowy, humanoid figure. It didn't move like a person or animal. It just floated, gliding next to us. Then its arm stretched out towards the back seat where my friend Dante was sitting. My brother and the other 2 people in the back were shouting at me to roll up the windows. They were panicking. My radar detector went off again. I floored it. Heart pounding, and we sped out of there until we reached a parking lot near a bridge a few miles away. Everyone in both cars was shaken up, and we all saw the same thing. I still don't know what to make of it, a shared hallucination, some local folklore manifesting in our minds, or something else. Has anyone experienced anything similar in that area or anywhere near Gravity Hill? The next story is titled 283 East Broadway, submitted by Black WDW21. When I was a kid, 6 or 7, my mom moved us into an apartment which had been an old home converted into apartments. The house was about 3 homes down the street from a mortuary in which there was a wayward cemetery behind it. That's another story. So when we first moved in, I think everything was fine, but eventually my mom's bedroom door would swing open and slam shut and repeat. My mom told me that it was something wrong with the hinges of the door which caused it to do that, but my gut always told me different. Some days it would open and shut here and there, but there were some nights it would go wild. Fast forward. I didn't want to sleep in my room because I always see a silhouette of a person in the doorway, just looking at me. One specific thing that happened to me that I know for sure I will never forget is that one day my grandmother was babysitting me, and she told me not to run in the house. She left me inside to go sit in the porch, so I decided to fill my water gun and join her. I went in the kitchen, which, if you can picture, there was a straight shot from the back of the apartment to the front door with no obstructions. A sprinter's dream. The set went like this. Starting at the back of the apartment, it went from the kitchen to the dining room, to the living room/door, just wide open space. I filled my water gun and took off full speed. As soon as I hit the living room, I was pushed and held down. I screamed, but nothing would come out. It felt like I was glued to the floor for hours. I couldn't hear anything. I couldn't move. Nothing. It felt like sleep paralysis, except I was fully awake. I honestly don't know how long I was on the floor, but 1 minute the sound didn't exist, and the next, it was like someone turned the volume on the universe all the way up to its max as my grandma walked into the door. The look I gave her had to be wild because I was so confused. I asked her if she heard me screaming, and she looked at me like I was crazy and said no. I ended up telling her what happened to me, and she sternly told me not to run around in the apartment. That night when my mom got home from work, I heard her mentioning how, you know, that man killed his wife and hung himself in your bedroom doorway, and that's why it keeps opening now. She is feeling and seeing things. My mom began letting me sleep with her or on the couch. Our neighbor said that one time she locked her front door, which was a chain lock deadbolt and bottom lock. It was midday and she went to take a shower. When she got out, the front door was wide open. I still try to research the home and overall area, but I always come up empty. This happened in Salem, New Jersey. This next story is titled The Theater Ghost, submitted by Sleepy EMT10. It's been a while since I shared a ghost story, but who doesn't love a good one? Like all my stories, these are real events that happened in my life. I'm not calling myself a believer, certainly a skeptic who wants to find reasoning behind these things. I'll share another true event happened in my life, ghost or other explanation, you can decide. Brace yourself for a moderate read. Once again, to protect the building and school, the names have been changed. Many of my lifelong friends will know that I was involved in theater growing up. I didn't act or sing, and I hated being on stage, but I always enjoyed the production aspect of theater. The lighting, set design, sound, etc. I started doing that at a young age, probably around 8 years old, when I ran my first spotlight for a theater camp. This theater camp was a school in Morris County, New Jersey, which was a private middle and high school. Wilson Hall was at one point the name of the building which housed the theater and music classrooms. It's since been repurposed for other classes and is no longer the theater. While I did not attend this school, I still helped them growing up as my family befriended a musical theater teacher at the school. Anyways, theater people are always superstitious, and everyone involved in a theater will say that each theater has its own ghost. There is even something left on the stage called a ghost light, which many theaters leave on the stage lit during the night. The ghost of Wilson Hall was well known if you had formed any frequent attendance in this building. If before a show, you didn't ask the ghost of Wilson for a good show, something bad will usually happen on opening night. Anyways, these were the first real run-ins with something I couldn't explain in my life. First, in the early years of paranormal investigating, there was a teacher there who was intrigued by the stories of the ghost of Wilson Hall. This is before the ages of smartphones and high-end cameras that could record without a physical tape. This teacher took a VHS camcorder one night, placed it in the band room on a cart 1 floor below the theater. He plugged it in, hit record, and left it to record all night. Now, the taping capabilities of these cameras was limited, mind you, and it could only record about 2 hours before it would stop. After watching the video the following morning, the teacher showed us the results. It was pitch black, minus a small nightlight left plugged in since the IR/night vision cameras weren't a thing. About an hour after the recording began, you could hear footsteps in the band room. Clear as day footsteps in the same room. Then sounds of stuff getting moved around behind the camera happened. It was right around this time the camera cut to a short static before recording again with nothing happening. What made this interesting was the teacher reported that he had the camera plugged into the bottom outlet because the top was occupied by a TV. When he came in the next morning, the plugs have reversed. Interesting, right? Another year, at this point I was about 15 years old, I was helping them with a stage production. Like every other production, we had set roles and responsibilities. One of mine was to turn on and off the speaker systems before and after use. Anyways, we had finished an afternoon show, and I did my role of turning off the sound system. The production crew left for a late lunch, early dinner, and returned back to the theater before the evening showing. It's about 4 p.m. and me and 2 other members are talking in the entrance to the theater. I know for a fact that the sound system was off since I turned it off before I left. While standing there, the speakers in the theater at near max volume just blasted a static sound, like the sound you would hear on a TV when you selected the wrong input. We literally jumped and were caught off guard by this. I get back to the sound system closet and find that since we've returned back to the theater from our break, it somehow turned itself on. Mind you, this alone would not cause the sound, as simply turning the system on would only cause a dull hum in a perfectly silent environment. Somehow the system turned itself on. Volume on sliders located on the sound control board upstairs in the control booth were near maxed. And a sound that I have never heard in my years of theater work began to pump itself through the speakers with no input selected on the control board. I was left startled and confused. The other crew members were just as baffled. Were we just victims of the ghost of Wilson Hall? It came across to me later that day, we did not thank the ghost of Wilson for letting us use the theater. I had a few other weird experiences in the building, but those are for a different day. This story is titled, Seeing the Spirit of My Grandmom Using Randonautica. Reposting here because I figured the story may be scrolled past on the subreddit Randonauts page due to its length. Submitted by Most Recent Version 94. Before we continue with this next story, I want to let you know what Randonautica is. Per Google, Randonautica is a mobile app that uses a quantum random number generator to give you a set of coordinates for your local area. The idea is to encourage you to explore your area with an idea in mind of what you'd like to come across. Okay, back to the story. A week ago yesterday, my family on my dad's side lost their matriarch. She lost a year-long fight to lung cancer after a long life of smoking cigarettes. She was 84 and had quit sometime in her 40s. She was a compassionate, gentle, academic, and extremely intelligent woman, an Italian immigrant, and mother of 6 children with several college degrees. A firm believer in spirituality, astrology, and the writings of Zecharia Sitchin. She was on the short side with an average build for someone her age and tan complexion. She always sported a short gray haircut and almost always wore colorful one-piece dresses and gowns that came down to her knees. I was lucky enough to become closer to her before she passed, as I never spent much quality time with her as a child. She spent her whole life in Collingswood, New Jersey, and passed peacefully with her children by her side. Yesterday, a week after her death, was her viewing. I knew this was the last time I'd ever see my grandma, albeit in a preserved and corpse-like state. The viewing was somber, yet hopeful, with no shortage of smiles, laughter, and stories. She had raised 5 very goofy boys, who are now 5 very goofy men. During the priest's sermon, it stood out to me when he said we will probably still see or hear my grandmom as we go about our lives. I know he likely meant this in the way of seeing or hearing things that remind us of her and our time spent with her. Little did I know that later that night, I would see what I believed to be her spirit, or a sign that she's watching over us. The burial is set for tomorrow, Friday. The priest blessed her body, and we all headed to my cousin's house afterwards. The rest of the day was spent with my family, drinking, eating, and sharing stories together. I've never felt so close and connected with my dad's side of the family before. We all celebrated her life in the only way she would want us to, as a family. I left the gathering in the evening with my brother and his girlfriend, and suggested that we head down to the street to the park where we spent a lot of time as kids whenever we would come visit. We smoked some weed and decided to try randonauting. Mind you, I don't really smoke often, so I was zooted. We spent a few minutes trying to agree on an intention and then decided it would only be fitting to set our intention as our grandma. We generated an anomaly, can't remember if it was a void or attractor, using the temporal server, and it gave us a point in a residential neighborhood across the pond that divided the park. We began the 15-minute walk towards the coordinates. One moment that stood out to me was as we passed a peaceful, grassy glen off to the side of the road, bathed in the warm sunlight of the evening. Perched on a log in the middle of a clearing was a single red cardinal, sitting as still as can be. As I pointed it out to my brother, it flew away, out of sight. Only now am I recalling all of this. Did I think to Google the symbolic significance of cardinals? You can look it up yourself, but mythology suggests that cardinals act as a messenger between the spirit world and our world, sometimes as a sign that loved ones are still watching over us. According to superstition, if you can see a cardinal, one of your loved ones wants you to know that they're watching over you and that you're not alone. As I read this now, I get chills. As in this moment, I only interpret it as the simple beauty of nature, but the coincidence doesn't end there. As we approached our destination, we realized that our point was in the backyard of a strange apartment complex, which looked like a weird red/white castle. We were on the sidewalk in a quiet residential neighborhood during the golden hour of the day, with sunlight barely peeking over the horizon, spotting the neighborhood with patches of light. As we stood there deliberating about whether or not to risk trespassing in broad daylight, something caught my eye about 4 blocks down the sidewalk. An older-looking woman with tan complexion, on the shorter side, medium build, with short gray hair, and wearing a colorful knee-length gown, was walking at a medium pace down the sun-bathed sidewalk towards us. I almost thought nothing of it and did a double take, but when I looked back, my eyes were transfixed. Although she was at least 100 yards away, I swear this was the spitting image of my grandma. Even her gait was similar, a patient, sort of swaying hobble. I looked on, frozen in disbelief, as she abruptly cut to her left and crossed the street away from us, waving to a car stopped in front of her as she crossed. She continued walking away, perpendicular to us, until she disappeared from my view, past some trees and someone's lawn. It was like I broke out of some sort of trance, with full-body chills and a fluttering feeling in my stomach. I asked my brother and his girlfriend, "Holy shit, did you guys see that?" To which they replied, "See what?" I explained what I'd just seen, and they were pissed that I hadn't pointed out to them. I explained that I simply didn't know what to do or say. I felt completely transfixed, lost in time. It felt like I was in a dream for that brief moment. I was convinced that I had just seen my grandma, a sign that she was still there in New Jersey, hanging out until our final goodbyes at her burial tomorrow. We then realized a man was sitting on his front steps about 10 feet away from us, and he had witnessed the whole ordeal. So we quickly left, and we realized that we probably looked suspicious as hell. Now, I understand I had been drinking and was pretty stoned and had set out the intention of seeing something that made me think of my grandma, but I had no sort of expectation to see a physical representation of her person. And I'm certain that I wasn't hallucinating. The image of her that I saw yesterday is stained in my mind forever. I wasn't looking to draw some sort of ridiculous connection that evening, and I know that if I hadn't looked down the street, we would have left empty-handed, with nothing more than a pleasant evening walk at our conclusion. That, or we would have trespassed on the property without realizing that the guy was sitting behind us and risked getting into trouble. Whether you believe my story or not, what happened yesterday was incredibly meaningful to me personally. The fact that we saw the cardinal as we approached our destination and what I saw when we got there gave me the feeling of hope and peace. I know that my grandmom is still looking out over my family. Definitely the most powerful rondonauting experience I've ever had, and one of the most impactful spiritual experiences I've had in my life. I've seen and heard what I thought are ghosts before, but nothing like this. I think Randonautica is a tool that we can use to broaden our perception of reality, to appreciate the world around us, and to notice things that we otherwise block out or ignore. I'd love to hear all of your thoughts. I'm sorry for the excessively long story, but I feel like I had to do the experience justice. I also think it's important to note that I'm a very spiritual person and that I have no idea what lies beyond the threshold of physical existence. I am not religious, but I am a believer in the power and transience of the human spirit. I'm also not trying to say for a fact that I just saw my grandmom's spirit. I'm aware it could have been some random old lady walking down the street. To me, this was all too significant to be a coincidence. Even if it all was, I'm moved. I love you, Grandma. I can't wait for our souls to join each other again in the great unknown. Okay, so that wrapped up the stories for today. Now, we do have a bonus story for you because we're now going into the official cryptid of New Jersey. And that cryptid is the Jersey Devil. Now, with the Jersey Devil, before I go ahead and read this story related to it, this is also, the Jersey Devil lies in the Pine Barrens in New Jersey, which is also on our top 4 list for today's most haunted locations. So I'm going to throw in an extra 5th location for the New Jersey list as well. All right, but a little bit of backstory of the Jersey Devil per Wikipedia here, but a lot of this is pretty relevant. So in South Jersey and Philadelphia folklore, in the United States, the Jersey Devil, also known as the Leeds Devil, which we'll get to later, is a legendary creature or cryptid said to inhabit the forests of the Pine Barrens in South Jersey, which again is one of our top locations. So the creature is often described as a flying biped with hooves, and there are many variations. The common description is that of a bipedal kangaroo-like or wyvern-like creature with a horse or goat-like head, leathery bat-like wings, horns, small arms with clawed hands, legs with cloven hooves, and a forked or pointed tail. It is also said that it has a strange elongated body and a thick tail. It has been reported to move quickly and is often described as emitting a high-pitched, blood-curdling scream. So let me go ahead and read you this last story here, and then we'll go ahead into the origins of the Jersey Devil and also the Pine Barrens. So this is titled, Me Encountered with the Jersey Devil, submitted by Dragon567. And they write, for those of you who have never heard of the legend, I'll give you a brief outline and description. The Jersey Devil is a legendary creature that only lives in New Jersey in the U.S. The Lenni Lenape, local Native Americans, have a similar creature in their folklore, and they named its haunting grounds as Papoessing, which translate loosely to Place of the Dragon. Hopefully I'm pronouncing that right. But Swedish explorers also named the region Drake Kill, where Drake is a term for dragon and Kill is a term for river or arm of the sea. The main story is that Miss Leeds was the mother of 12 children. When she found out she was pregnant with the 13th, she cried that this one would be the devil. She gave birth normally with her family and midwife nearby, but then it began to change. It changed from a normal baby to a creature with hooves, a goat head, bat wings, and a forked tail. It growled and screamed, then killed the midwife and family before flying up the chimney. Now, my part of the story, it was only about 10 o'clock at night. I was slowly drifting off to sleep when I heard what sounded like horse hooves outside my window. I rationalized it to be a horse farm down the road. But then I realized the horse farm was 3 or 4 miles away, and I wouldn't be hearing hooves this clearly. I was instantly seized with fear, though I couldn't figure out why. I wanted to look out the window to look at the wooden deck just outside to see what it was, but I was nearly too scared to look. I eventually peeked out. I saw a large creature standing on my deck. It had bat-like wings and a pronounced snout. 2 horns spouted from its head, and it had 2 smaller claws on its upper body with horse-like lower legs. It looked at me for a moment before beating its wings and flying away. I didn't sleep that whole night. So that was their story. They also gave me a little bit more detail as well. I asked them if they noticed anything out of place or disturbed when they went outside that morning. They said it was a long time ago when they submitted this story, but they didn't remember much of anything out of place. They do have some more ghostly encounter stories that they're going to send over to me, so that'll be cool to read. But yeah, a little interesting tidbit on some sightings. They're pretty rare from what I hear and have researched. Now, the submitter did a good job giving a little bit of an origin to the Jersey Devil. Just a little bit more now going into the top locations. The Pines Barrens and Jersey Devil together. So, historical background, the Pine Barrens are a vast stretch of forest in southern New Jersey covering over 1 million acres. Settlers often consider the land cursed. It was infertile, hard to farm, and isolated. In 1735, the legend of the Jersey Devil was born, with Mother Leeds, as stated earlier. The paranormal tie-in, for nearly 300 years, locals and travelers have claimed sightings of the creature, a winged beast with glowing red eyes, which tracks with the story. Farmers spoke of livestock mysteriously slaughtered in 1909. Newspapers across New Jersey reported a week of terror with dozens of alleged sightings, from police officers to trolley drivers. To this day, campers and hunters still tell of blood-curdling shrieks echoing in the trees and strange tracks found in the sand. The Pine Barrens themselves, with their silence and isolation, amplify the fear whether or not the devil truly lurks there. So definitely a different vibe versus the squonk that we went through on episode 1. All right, so going into the other ones for the top locations. The first one technically on this list was Burlington County Prison in Mount Holly. So the historical background, it was built in 1811. The Burlington County Prison was designed by architect Robert Mills, who later designed the Washington Monument. It operated for over 150 years until its closure in 1965. During that time, countless inmates passed through its cells, some of petty crimes, others for brutal offenses. Executions were carried out here, and prisoners endured harsh conditions, overcrowding, and disease. Today, the prison stands as a museum, its heavy stone walls preserving centuries of suffering. So where we look at the paranormal tie-ins is that the visitors and staff claim that the inmates never left. Reports include cold drafts, the sound of footsteps in empty corridors, and apparitions of men in prison uniforms, particularly on the 3rd floor. In the basement, people have encountered the dark figure of a tall man believed to be one of the prison guards. Paranormal investigators often describe the energy as oppressive, as if the anguish of those imprisoned there are still clinging to the walls. Number 2 was the Pine Barrens and the Jersey Devil. The next one on the list is the Emlyn Physic Estate, located in Cape May. So for the historical background, it was built in 1879. The Emlyn Physic Estate is a grand Victorian mansion, once home to Dr. Emlyn Physic Jr., a wealthy physician who never married. He lived there with his mother and maiden until their deaths. After the family declined, the estate fell into a despair before being restored as a museum showcasing Victorian life. If you go on to Google, you'll see that this is a really huge house. It's a 18-room mansion. But for the paranormal tie-in, the history lingers in more than just the furniture and the wallpaper that you see there. So visitors and staff have reported shadowy figures moving across the hallways, ghostly children's laughter, and the feeling of being watched. Dr. Physic's mother and Aunt Emily are said to haunt the house, still wandering its ornate rooms. Tour guides describe cold spots and sudden chills as the family refuses to leave their beloved estate. Paranormal investigators suggest the house is layered with residual energy from its former inhabitants. The next one here is the Devil's Tree in Bernards Township. So again, historical background here. So the Devil's Tree is a isolated oak standing alone in a field in Bernards Township. Local legends tie it to dark events, stories of a farmer who murdered his family before hanging himself there, or its use of a lynching site during times of radical violence. Though records are scarce, its reputation as a cursed place has persisted for decades. So the paranormal tie-ins with that unfortunate background, locals swear the tree radiates heat, even in the dead of winter, and snow never falls around it. Those who disrespect the tree by carving into it or trying to cut it down report car troubles, accidents, or worse on their way home. Chainsaw blades are said to break when used against it. Some believe it's a gateway to hell itself. Its grim aura, combined with the chilling folklore, make it one of New Jersey's most notorious paranormal landmarks. So the last one on my list I added because I saw a lot of people talking about this on Reddit, and that's going to be Clinton Road in West Milford. There's another similar haunted road called the Shades of Death Road, a couple miles away from it as well. But we'll just talk about the Clinton Road for today. The Clinton Road is a 10-mile stretch of winding, isolated roadway cutting through the woods of West Milford. So dating back to the colonial times, the road has always had an eerie reputation thanks to its remoteness, lack of traffic, and dense forest surrounding. Over the years, it's become a hotspot for urban legends, criminal activity, and strange happenings, earning the title of America's most haunted road in some circles. So where we have some paranormal tie-ins, there's a lot of stuff. If you go on Google, Reddit, Facebook, it's everywhere. So the most famous legend is that of the Ghost Boy Bridge. I believe this is also known as the Penny Bridge, but locals say that if you toss a coin into the water below, the spirit of a drowned boy will throw it back. Motorists also report phantom headlights appearing in their rearview mirror, only for no cars to be found when they pull over. Some even claim to have seen strange creatures darting around the road, from hellhounds to shadowy figures. Adding to its dark reputation, stories circulating about occult groups meeting in the woods, abandoned structures tied to ritual activity, and even bodies being dumped there by the mafia in the 20th century. Whether ghostly, criminal, or just psychological, Clinton Road has terrified travelers for generations. Kind of reminds me of a familiar road that I know that we call Beaver Valley in Delaware. So we'll talk about that more on the Delaware episode. But yeah, very creepy road. I went onto Google Maps and I just placed myself randomly on a road trying to find the bridge. It looks just kind of like an offset of the road with water underneath it. But yeah, very creepy in the daylight. I can only imagine what it looks like at night. Okay, we did it. That wraps up the second episode covering the great state of New Jersey. As a reminder, if you would like to submit your own stories so they may be read on this podcast, please send them over to paranormalcitystories@gmail.com and it may be read on a future episode. Just make sure to let us know the state and, if possible, the city where the story has taken place. And until next time, keep your eyes open, your mind curious, and your lights on.